Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to the New Mainstream podcast,
where we explore the impact of multicultural consumers on marketing and media.
I'm your host, Mario Carrasco, and co-founder of Think Now. Welcome to the New Mainstream podcast, everyone. Excited, joined today by Rob Vélez, Vice President of Inclusive Sales at Vevo, where he leads multicultural ad sales and develops strategies to connect authentically with diverse audiences. Rob is bilingual, bicultural, inclusive marketing thought leader, and has been recognized as Adweek's Young Influentials. Rob, great to have you with us today.
Happy to be here, Mario, and thanks for having me.
Yeah, we were talking a little bit before we hit record that we have a variety of guests on here. I have in insights, marketing, always especially excited to have someone in our industry and in inclusive and diverse advertising. So excited for our conversation.
Yeah, same here. Anytime we get a chance to talk about multicultural and where it fits within the marketing world, I'm all for it. So happy to join you here, and let's get right into it.
Yeah, let's get into it. So before we jump in, I mean, you have an impressive career. I mentioned a little bit of your background, but before we talk, specifically about your role now at Vevo, how did you tell us a little bit about your career journey? This is one of my favorite parts. It's rare that you have someone that knows, hey, I want to get into inclusive marketing or marketing. It's usually a windy road. What was your path?
Man, I got to go back and remember, because that was over 15 years ago.
No, that's not that long. That's not that long.
I feel like an OG at this point, but yeah, I actually I got out of college and I was working some odd jobs at the time, and I had a friend in the industry who was already on the agency side, and I remember having a conversation with him about wanting to sort of change what I was doing. So I submitted my resume, and he sent it out to his network of people. And I ended up getting a call from Univision at the time, and entry level position. I said, you know what, sure, like let's check it out, see what that's all about. But never really, knew anything about marketing. So I was looking for something different. I jumped in. And it was almost like being thrown right into the fire, right? Like this was 2006, and I got exposed to like a whole new world where they're talking about underrepresented communities and how to position these audiences for these marketers and etc. So I felt like it was like my post grad sort of education where I just like learned everything that I could around selling with insights, really diving into multicultural, right? And so that was really like how I got started in the industry. It was really just by chance through a friend. And while I was there, I just grew to appreciate it and developed a passion for it, right? There was something about being the underdog, which I always love. I always love the story of the underdog and just being that underdog and not being represented and seeing what the challenge is. It was what motivated me to not just stay within the industry, but try to excel and be a game changer, right? Like, how do we change the game? So I would say that that's sort of like my journey into the industry. And then from then on, it just evolved into so many different things.
Yeah, I mean, Univision is a great place to start. I mean, there's a lot of people that have gone on to different companies, many that have stayed there, but they're one of the godfathers, right, of multicultural, inclusive, and continue to grow.
Oh yeah. Oh, you have to respect what they were able to do early on when this industry didn't have a voice, for Latinos in the U.S. I mean, we're going back to like maybe the 60s, 70s, right, where it was literally just one channel devoted, and they've obviously, you got to appreciate how they've carved out that road to see where we are today, which is a lot more options and more nuance, etc. But yeah, early on in those days, you just got to appreciate the trail that they were able to blaze for the rest of us.
For sure. And you mentioned this a little bit at your time at Univision, you said you were leveraging data. So now you're at Vevo. You're responsible for expanding multicultural ad sales revenue. Can you talk a little bit more about how now you're leveraging marketplace insights and proprietary data to develop some of your strategies?
Yeah, yeah. So at Vivo, when I got to Vivo just over 6.5 years ago, at this point, I had a lot of institutional knowledge, right? Just being a student of the game, which is what I always pride myself is I could always be learning something. But on top of that, you go to a company like Vivo and now you're talking about representing music videos, which before I got to Vivo, I had no idea that, something like this existed. So with that institutional knowledge that I had coming in here, I was like, oh yeah, music, that's a huge passion point for everybody, but in particular for underrepresented communities, Hispanics, Black Americans, Asians, etc. So, coming in here and like really understanding the insights and okay, what is the makeup of this audience and what are they consuming and what is their behavior like? Is it, predominantly mobile, but there's also some desktop, and then now introducing, CTV over the last 4 years. It's been such a evolution to where I started to where we are today, just within Vivo alone. But music is just, one of those things that it resonates with everybody, and but also differently, right? Like it not in the same way. And there's so many options within music videos and the artists that are performing that really connect with almost anybody right? I think the joke is that if you don't like music, then you're kind of what is going on there, kind of thing. But I think music, the old cliche is the soundtrack of our lives. And we utilize those insights, that research, to really inform us as to what the opportunity is for marketers, for brands, right? Because that's ultimately what we're here to do is how do we make that connection in an authentic way for the brand to deliver their messaging to a captive and engaged audience who's consuming, arguably, but I wouldn't argue it, the best media or best video content that exists out there. So that's really, sort of the challenge, but also the opportunity that we have here at Vivo. And, we've done a pretty good job in uncovering what those insights and strategies are. But like I said before, it's really taking the knowledge that you already have about the marketplace and then taking this passion point that exists within music and particularly music videos, and then coming up with that narrative and that go-to-market strategy that's obviously going to resonate to the marketing community, because ultimately they need to push product, they need to sell their services. So it's like, how do we make that connection for them? And we find that we're pretty successful at doing it because again we represent something that is such a huge passion point for these audiences.
You reminded me of I had a conversation with an executive at Google one time, talking about YouTube. This is probably like 8 years ago. And he mentioned to me how regional Mexican was one of the top streaming music on YouTube. And this is a while ago, right? Now, flash forward, corridos are now kind of hit the
Mhm.
mainstream. Peso Pluma just had a big concert in Los Angeles. He brought out Snoop Dogg. Can you share any tidbits like that of like of I don't know, trends, that you see in some of the data there and the music being streamed or the music videos being watched?
Yeah, totally. So very, very similar sentiment or I guess story for you on in that same vein is that when I got here in 2008, we had just gone over the Despacito song, right? Despacito came out in 2017, and Despacito was the biggest hit ever. Like it's
Yeah.
still, I think it's already over 8 billion views on YouTube. It's still the number one piece of content that exists on YouTube.
Really?
So
That's crazy.
it's still, yeah, and every year millions upon millions of viewers are still consuming it around the world. But what's interesting about that is that so you had Despacito, right? And that sort of opened up the reggaeton era, right? Like you had now the likes of J Balvin coming in, and so all these other artists that are now coming into the scene and introducing themselves and that reggaeton style to the world, which has caught on fire and it's still blazing today. But I remember having a conversation with my team and asking them, hey, can we break down the Latin genre? I want to see the subgenres, right? And that's something that I'm really passionate about. I really like to like dive deeper into the rabbit hole. And I remember we got the data and we're looking at, okay, you have regional Mexican, reggaeton and trap, Vivo Latino, pop, rock, etc. Right? All the different bachata, merengue, all of those, right? And
Yeah.
I remember looking at the regional Mexican numbers, and I'm like, wait a minute. I'm like, is this right?
Yeah, exactly.
And I'm coming, into it already thinking, okay, reggaeton for sure. That's going to be number one because again, it was everywhere. Sure enough, it wasn't. It was number two, right behind regional Mexican music. And I was just looking at the artist, and I'm like, oh my god, first of all, I had no idea. Second of all, most of those artists I had never heard of. I'm like, who are these people?
Yeah.
Los Angeles Azules, Christian
Yeah.
Roland. I'm like, where did they come from? And it was just so eye opening to me that first of all that I was unaware, but it really expanded my curiosity to like learn more. Where till this day, regional Mexican is still dominating. It's still doing more numbers than any other Latin subgenre that we have here. And, because of that, we've actually dedicated resources to launch connected television channels, focused on regional Mexican music because the power of that audience is strong and it's felt. And so we want to make sure that we are creating everything that we can to super serve those audiences, but also, again, build that bridge to the marketers who want to reach them. So yeah, very fascinating on the regional Mexican front. And, I still now I've become a fan. You mentioned
Yeah.
Peso Pluma, like his work, but one of my favorites is actually Los Angeles Azules.
Yeah.
Los Angeles Azules, old school band. I mean, they got like 10 people on the band, but uh,
Classic. Yeah.
what I love about them is that they have this cumbia sound. And
Yeah.
I'm Colombian, so I can relate to the cumbia sound. I'm like, man, these guys are doing it really good.
Yeah. No, yeah, I'm a bit, so I've, that's the music I grew up with. Um, and we actually did a study. I'm going to send it to you after. I should have sent it to you before, but I realized, right, working in research, you have this huge genre. No one's really dove into the listenership. So we partnered with an ad agency. You probably heard of them, Orsi, out here
Yeah.
on the West Coast, and we did a study on corridos. Um, and it's really interesting stuff too. I mean, so the big takeaway there was that it's not just Latinos listening to corridos. It's non-Latinos. In the Hispanic dominant DMAs, the music is just everywhere, so everybody's listening to it. And I thought that was really fascinating. Like it's not just Spanish dominant. It's everyone.
Yeah, you're starting to see, and we've seen a little bit of those insights as well, that particularly with Gen Z, they're more open to exploring music outside of their language, even outside of what they traditionally, I guess, listen to. But there's more curiosity that's embedded within the younger generation that they want to explore other genres outside of their, what they're normally used to. But it's fascinating, and I think what I'm seeing, well, at least what we're seeing is that at least with regional Mexican, it's almost um, a retro acculturation where now you have this young generation who want to stay within like their heritage of regional Mexican music versus trying to go out and be a rapper or something else. It's like, no, we're going to actually continue on this along this line of heritage that we have, and maybe we'll add our own spin and flavor to it. But traditionally, it's still within the genre.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think I just saw yesterday Becky G, who's traditionally a pop artist. She sampled some of her music, and it's got a regional Mexican flair.
Yeah,
So
no,
that'll be
it's coming
interesting.
back, and nothing, and it never left.
Yeah, right, right,
Right?
right. No, this is a great segue to my next question. Talking about inclusive marketing, obviously crucial in today's diverse landscape. You mentioned Gen Z. Gen Z is the most diverse generation in our nation's history, right? It's the first majority minority generation. Um, and so when you're advising clients on campaign strategies, like what how do you handle this question of authentic connection? Like, what does that mean to you, and how can clients, maybe listeners that are want to tap into various cultural backgrounds, what how can they be authentic when connecting with this new diverse audience?
Yeah, we go through this every time we have either a new partner coming in who wants to work with us, or even to some existing partners who just want to, hit the reset button. But it always comes down to us asking the questions to them. It's like, well, where are you in your journey in terms of reaching these audiences, right? Are you um, far along the line, like more sophisticated, or are you just starting out, right? And I think it's important to ask those questions early on, because what you're trying to gauge is what's the level of what's the level of metrics that they're going to use um, to say whether this was successful or not, right? So you always want to figure out what does success look like for a client who may just be exploring and jumping into uh, the multicultural space, right? As we know it, and it's, you want to find out what are those going to be, those KPIs. What are your objectives? Ultimately, obviously, we know you want to drive sales, etc. But what are your second and tertiary outcomes? Are you looking for more brand awareness? Are you looking for more consideration, to buy your product? So it always comes down to that. And then after that, well, what does your creative look like? Who did your creative, right? There's a few creative shops out there, but who's working on your creative? What does it look like? Is it in language, or is it in culture, right? So it's figuring out, okay, do you have the right assets that you're going to utilize to reach these audiences and make that authentic connection? And then, the last part is obviously the execution, and that's where we can obviously tailor make a plan for our clients that's going to yield the highest level of success, right? And depending on who they're looking for, if they're looking for a Gen Z or a millennial or even a Gen X, we're going to suggest different types of content and artists that we have available, because we represent all music videos, right? And we have the spectrum of all those demographics available to us. So it really becomes nuanced, but I think a lot of it for us is asking the right questions upfront first, identifying what's going to be determined as successful, and then figuring out, okay, within Vevo's ecosystem, what do we suggest you should do in terms of an execution? What type of genres you should be aligned with, or artists? And does it make more sense to go on connected television, or a broad platform, which will include our digital extensions of desktop and mobile? So it's a little bit of everything on that part, but it really just depends on where the journey is for the marketer.
And so there's a question I ask a lot of our guests that are in multicultural, and I'm sure you've experienced this, where clients get overwhelmed. You start asking, they just think about execution, right? But you're backing them up and asking them questions. How do you deal with clients that feel overwhelmed? Like, how do you usher them through the process so they're not feeling overwhelmed? Um, yeah, give us some
Yeah.
tips there.
The old analysis paralysis, right? You're
Exactly.
overcomplicating it, and I mean, how do we overcome it? I don't think that's anything Vevo will ultimately solve by itself. But what we advise is, listen, make the connection, right? Like, show that you're interested in reaching out, because some action is better than no action at all. And while you're taking that initial first step, let's make sure that you have a game plan in place, that you're going to develop a strategy for how you are going to connect with these audiences. And how do you build a strategy? Well, if you don't have the resources, then hire the right people, right? Because there's a lot of experts in the space that can help and guide you with your planning, with your creative strategy, etc. So there's plenty of professionals in the field that can help you with uncovering some of those insights and put together a strategy plan that um, will work for what the brand is looking for, right? So that's kind of like the approach that we take. But I always say action is better than no action. And let's take a dive into this. I promise it's not going to bite. It's not going to hurt you. By the way, language. I know I mentioned it earlier, but some people get caught up with language. Language isn't a strategy. Language is a
Mhm.
tactic, right?
Yeah.
So it's not the end all be all for you to have a Spanish language creative or an English language creative. By the way, I think today's numbers say that almost three-quarters of the Hispanic population here in the U.S. is bilingual. So it just depends on who within that Hispanic community you want to target. That maybe the language is going to make more sense, but generally speaking, it's a bilingual community. They can understand both English and Spanish. So language is no longer, I guess, the excuse to not jump in. I would say just be thoughtful in your creative, have representation. What kind of cultural cues are you putting into the creative to signal that, hey, I see you, I'm talking to you, right? So et cetera. So yeah, that's kind of like our approach to it.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, just get started, right? And like and when you partner with people like yourself that know what they're doing, like you're gonna help them out. So I agree with that. Um, let's talk a little bit about music videos, right? I grew up in the '90s, height of MTV. Dropping a music video was like the biggest thing ever, right? And um, I feel like the importance went away for a little while, but it's made full circle. Like you talked, Despacito is still being streamed in the millions. So it's a powerful medium for cultural expression. How do you see music videos as a tool for inclusive marketing and representing diverse voices and stories?
Yeah, I mean, music videos, to me, there's no better opportunity for marketers. Fundamentally speaking, I think every marketer should include music videos as part of their media strategy. I mean, that's
Mm.
just period. Because I've seen the power. I see the power that music videos and their audiences have. It is unbelievable. It is you can't equate it to anything else that's available out there. And if it does, it's seasonal, it's sporadic, it's not consistent like music videos does. We do
Mm.
numbers every single day, right? This is part of people's everyday lives, not just once a year, twice a year, etc. So it needs to be part of everybody's strategy. And I mean, just to give you some stats, I mean, about two-thirds of the Hispanic American viewer agree that watching content which reflects their cultural heritage, um, that actually reflects the cultural heritage and personal identity is important. So they're already leaning into this and are figuring out that like music videos is a touch point of theirs that really shapes their lives. Another interesting stat, that I encountered, and I'm trying to recall it off the top of my head, but 70% of the Hispanic American viewers say that they watch music videos when they want to find content that authentically represents all parts of their identity, right? So you have this sentiment where a majority of Hispanic Americans already consume music videos, but are also telling you that is a big part of who they are and what they represent. So for me, and if I'm a marketer, okay, how do I tap into that then, right? Because you have an audience that's super engaged. Obviously, they're passionate about this. So why wouldn't I want my brand to be part of that receptivity? Of course I would. So that's kind of like the nuance and understanding of it. But I think music videos provide just a tremendous amount of opportunity for any marketer that is looking to reach Hispanics and audiences in general. Again, it's not just for the Hispanic marketplace, but for anybody in general.
Oh yeah, agreed. And I mean, it's part of my daily routine, right? You just have music videos on the background as we're working, right? It's universal.
No, it totally is. I mean, um, and I was, what's funny is that before getting to Vivo, like I mentioned, I had no idea about being able to monetize music videos in the way that we're doing it now. But I also didn't realize, and maybe I was out of touch, but I didn't realize how many people watched music videos, right? I was like, because the first thing that I thought when I applied was, oh, people are still watching music videos, right? Because I remember the MTV days, and
Yeah.
then all of a sudden it went away. It went to YouTube, and I was like, okay, I guess music videos aren't a thing anymore. But I was so wrong.
Yeah.
Like music videos actually ended up growing even more once it went into the digital space. So it's just fascinating to see how much this specific content has performed over the years, and it continues to grow in scale. That's the unbelievable part. It's like the NFL. It just continues to grow in ratings. Every single year, it's more and more people are just tuning in. And I think there's a host of different reasons for why that is. Where the content is being delivered now is very accessible, unlike before. The length of the music video, right? 3.5, 4 minutes, super snackable for you to watch and be on your way, etc. So there's so many positive things that are working for it that continues to grow this vertical in general.
Yeah, no, and something I just realized right now, and you talking, like, I think a big thing in the '90s, right, when music videos, I remember like the price tags were like Hollywood blockbuster price tag, right? Like just super expensive. But now technology's gotten so good, the barrier to entry is gone, right? Like you can film a super high quality 4K video on your phone and put it on YouTube. Um, so now every artist has a chance to have a music video that's really good quality.
Yeah, you do. And what I love though about the another interesting stat, because you mentioned the quality of it, and surely anybody can post up, but you have to appreciate also what these artists who are signed to the labels are actually doing in terms of the investment into the music content. I mean, on average, it's probably about $1 million per minute, which actually
Wow.
competes with a Netflix episode of any kind because of the quality that they also put into it. So for these music videos, you can just appreciate how much of an investment they're making in their art form, to show it to their fans, and it shows. It shows. You can see, the quality of their work when they release it and premiere it. So I've taken more of appreciation for that aspect as well, not just in the music video itself, but the quality of the music video that they're putting into it. One of the other things that I realized that I didn't realize early on in when I joined Vevo was very specifically to the Latin artists was I realized that some of these artists were filming their music videos in their country of origin, right? So like I didn't realize that I think when I first caught it was maybe Shakira and Carlos Vives. What was it? The song Bicicleta, and they're literally in Medellin, and I'm like, wait a minute, like I think I know that place.
That's awesome.
And I'm literally like rewinding and pausing. I'm like, I've been there,
Yeah,
right? And like, so there's this tie-in to the music video itself where they also shoot it on location, which I think also is like another point for why Latinos gravitate so much towards this content, right? Is that not only are they appreciating the music and they can relate to the music, but even some of the filming that they do, it takes them back home, right?
for
Or it
sure.
reminds them of their parents' or grandparents' home, which I find also equally very fascinating.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. Yeah, so my family's from Durango, from northern Mexico, and that's kind of known to be, well, a lot of the old westerns were filmed there, and there's a lot of a lot of the regional Mexican film there, which is cool. Um, so I want to go back to something you mentioned initially about your career journey. You mentioned being an underdog. I understand what that means, being in the multicultural marketing, right? It's amazing getting to connect with our cultures at work, but also there's some difficulties, right? Can you share some of your challenges, some hurdles maybe you've had to overcome to show the value of what you're doing at Vivo?
Yeah, no, I know. There's always going to be challenges, right, Mario? I
Yeah,
mean, we wouldn't be in this industry or sticking around if we weren't constantly being challenged. But you know, I mean, you remember, I guess you were around to remember the total market approach, right?
oh
Remember
yeah,
that in the late
yeah,
2000s, where all of a sudden there wasn't a need for investing in specific media outlets that focused on Hispanics or other cultures. They thought they could do it through their general market buy, right? And we had to go through that whole you know era of trying to bring them back because they pulled their advertising and wanted to do it that way. And sure enough, they learned their lesson, right? Which was, oh no, we actually do need to go back because this approach isn't working. Because you can't create one ad for everybody, right? I think ultimately that was the lesson learned, is that one ad doesn't resonate equally with everybody. And if you're trying to reach everybody at the same time with the one ad, then you're really not talking to anybody, right? I
Yeah.
think you have to like be selective and be nuanced. So that was one that when I read the question or heard the question, I remember that immediately comes to mind. But you mentioned it, the analysis paralysis, right? I mean, that continues to be a challenge every now and then. Sometimes even brands would say it's not a priority. Reaching diverse audiences, which to me it just really
Crazy.
how can you be a marketer in 2024 and say that reaching diverse audiences is not a priority?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the one that just gets me the most, because it's like you're talking about 40%, 40 to 45% of the population, not a priority. Good luck.
Yeah.
Um,
I think again,
so,
going to Gen Z, you're talking about the majority of the population now.
yeah, exactly. And that's why the Gen Z demographic is it's compelling, because now you can't hide behind uh, the blanket of, well, no, diversity is not a priority. Well, look at Gen Z. Is Gen Z not a priority? Have you seen Gen Z? They are almost pretty much all diverse. So there's a lot there that obviously brands are starting to recognize, and I think that's what's, after all the work that we've done within the multicultural space and telling the story about how this tipping point is coming. Gen Z is now right there, about to tip the scales, right, into the next generation where it'll be predominantly diverse, right, with Gen Alpha. So we've been telling the story early on, but we were telling it so early that they just weren't paying attention to it, the marketers. But now that it's at their front door, now it's time to pay attention, right?
Yeah.
So the I think the challenges have become less, thankfully. But you still have a few, advertisers who, again, they're on their own journey. They're discovering, where they are going to fit in and how they're going to reach these new audiences that don't look anything like the old audiences they have. But that's where I always suggest and advise, like, it doesn't mean you have to do it on your own. Just hire the experts. There's plenty of people out there that can do it with you. You don't have to do it on your own, but the point is that you have to do it. You have to future proof your business. And how do you do that? You got to start talking to diverse audiences if you want to stay here, if you want to last a little longer.
No, that's great advice. And we mentioned Gen Z. Now we have Gen Z in the workforce. I don't know if you have Gen Z coworkers yet. I do. Um,
Oh, yeah.
so want to give them some advice. We have some Gen Z listeners. You're successful in the field. What advice would you give to young professionals who want to get into inclusive or diverse marketing?
Yeah. Like I said before, I think, myself personally, I'm a student of the game. And I just have this genuine curiosity and interest. So I say be curious. Um, be vocal as well. Don't be afraid to speak up. I think for me, that took me a little longer than I wanted it to. Early on in my career, I wasn't as vocal, or saying things that I felt would have been the right thing to do, or things that I didn't agree with. But be vocal. I think that's super important. You may be feeling a certain way that and not to say anything, you do yourself a disservice, and maybe also do somebody else a disservice by not, mentioning that thing. So definitely do that, and then just be an advocate. I realized that I was an advocate early on when I realized that, hey, I'm representing an underrepresented community within an underrepresented industry, right? So I feel a sense of responsibility now. Once those things kind of came into mind, that I have to be a champion. I have to advocate, and I have to represent the folks that I'm trying to tell these clients and tell these marketers that they need to reach out to, right? These are the under-communicated people that are going to help drive their business forward, right? With all the stats that we know about the growth in income and growth in education, et cetera, for any marketer, you need to make sure that you're speaking to them. So for me, my role here at Vevo and just my role in the industry has become one of like be an advocate and continue to push this industry forward, because ultimately we know it's going to be good for them. It's going to be good for business. So that would be my advice.
No, I love that. And I think that will resonate with Gen Z. I mean, a positive thing I see about that generation is they are vocal and they are advocates. So I'm excited to see how they positively impact our industry.
I agree. I think the work that we've been doing for a while now it's no longer going to be a trend where, you know, next year it'll sort of fizzle out. I truly believe it's here to stay, and it's going to be even stronger than ever moving forward.
Agreed. And believe it or not, we're almost at the end. So we have one last question. We have an audience question. We've been through lots of trends, right? You mentioned one, total market. We have programmatic now, AI, all of these affecting our industry. So how do you stay on top of the curve and identifying and capitalizing on new opportunities when it comes to multicultural engagement?
That's a good question. I try to just keep myself, you know, active with industry leaders and sort of ask questions, have conversations constantly. I stay going to conferences. You know, if you go to a conference, chances are I'll probably be there. Yeah. I just love to continue to educate myself, because there's always going to be things that are going to come up. Again, we're in the marketing world, but it's really been fueled by technology. You know, I think over the course of the last 10 years, technology has really injected itself into our industry. So, you know, I sign up to different publications, you know, just to get those morning newsletters. You know, I give it a quick read just to make sure I'm not missing out on anything. And then I zoom in or double click on something that I'm more interested in. But there's a host of different things, you know, that I try to keep myself, you know, understanding and learning as I go, just because I'm just genuinely curious. You know, I want to continue to see this thing through that I started, you know, in my career. And I feel like now we're, at least where I am, there's still more work to do. So I want to continue to see it through and see how far I can take it, and just continue to push the industry forward, right? But it just takes an open mind, be curious, you know, talk to your peers, attend conferences, just continue to be exploring what's happening out there. And sure enough, you'll find, you know, the answer to, you know, what you're looking for.
I love that. Yeah. And that's one thing I really love about our industry is there's really no content that we consume that's irrelevant, whether that's the news, conference, conversation, social media. It all affects marketing, right? And the more that you're curious and actively consuming content and thinking about, all right, what is this trend about? How is this new technology going to affect us? It's the best way to stay relevant. So I agree 100%.
Yeah, me too. We have to.
Rob, thank you. This has been an awesome conversation. Appreciate you sharing your insights. Appreciate all the work you're doing in inclusive marketing and moving our industry forward. For those of you that want to learn more about Rob's work or connect with him, best way to connect with you is that on LinkedIn?
Yep, you can reach out to me on LinkedIn, Robert Vélez. I'm sure there's probably a few, but just reach out to me and we'll connect.
Awesome. Thanks again. Thanks for joining the New Mainstream, and thanks for everybody for listening. Thanks to everyone listening in. To get more multicultural insights, check us out at thinknow.com and follow us on social media. You can also subscribe to this podcast on your favorite platform.